Welcome to Karen Stories, where the wildest Karen encounters unfold. Get ready for hilarious, unbelievable, and shocking moments as Karens make the most outrageous demands. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to never miss a crazy story. Let's dive in. I should have known something was wrong the moment I saw the first car. It was a sleek black SUV, parked neatly at the edge of my property like it belonged there. At first, I thought maybe a delivery driver had stopped for a quick break. No big deal. But when I came back from the grocery store 2 hours later, there were two more cars, one of them practically on my front lawn. My stomach twisted into a knot. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a one-time thing. I stepped out of my truck, groceries still in hand, and scanned the street. My new neighborhood had seemed perfect, quiet, suburban. Exactly the kind of place I'd always wanted to settle into. But now, my front yard looked like a makeshift parking lot. And the worst part? I had a gut feeling I knew exactly who was behind it. Karen. She lived next door, in a house that looked like something straight out of a real estate magazine. Perfectly manicured lawn, decorative wreath on the door, an SUV that was probably worth more than my truck. I had met her only twice since I moved in a few weeks ago, and both times had been unpleasant. The first time, she had strutted over while I was unloading furniture. A fake smile stretched across her lips. "Oh, I just love seeing young people moving into the neighborhood. But you know, that lot in front of your house? It's always been kind of a shared space." I had blinked at her, confused. Shared? Well, yes, she had continued, waving a manicured hand dismissively. We all sort of use it. My guests, Mark's family across the street, the mailman sometimes. You don't mind, do you? I had hesitated, not wanting to start a feud with my neighbor within my first week. Actually, I do. That's part of my property. Oh, she had said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Well, I'm sure we can figure something out. That had been the first red flag. The second was now staring me in the face. 3 cars, none of which were mine, all sitting comfortably on me land. I marched up to Karen's door, jaw tight, heartbeat hammering against my ribs. I rang the bell, twice. The door swung open, and there she was, standing in yoga pants and a pastel cardigan, her expression switching from mild surprise to practiced sweetness in an instant. "Oh, hey there, neighbor." I didn't even try to smile. "Karen, there are cars parked all over my property." She blinked at me as if I'd just spoken in another language. "Oh, yes, we had a little get-together. I figured you wouldn't mind." I let out a sharp breath, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Karen, I do mind. This is my property. You can't just let people park here." Her expression barely flickered, but there was a glint of something behind her eyes, something smug. "Oh, come on. It's just a few cars. It's not like you're using that space." I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw ached. "That's not the point. It's mine. You didn't ask. You just assumed it was okay." Karen sighed dramatically, as if I were the unreasonable one. "Wow. Okay. I guess I didn't realize you were so territorial." She crossed her arms, cocking her head. "I mean, we've been using that space for years. The previous owner never had a problem with it. I'm not the previous owner." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Fine. I'll ask my guests to move their cars. Happy?" I exhaled through my nose, nodding stiffly. "Thank you." She gave me a patronizing smile, one that made my skin crawl. "Of course. You know, if you ever need anything, we're very neighborly around here." I turned and walked back to my house. Fists clenched so hard my nails dug into my palms. By the time I reached my front porch, I heard her calling to someone inside, voice dripping with saccharine sarcasm. Can you believe some people? So uptight about a little parking space. I bit my tongue, forcing myself inside, telling myself this was over, that she would move the cars and it wouldn't happen again. I was dead wrong. The next morning, I woke up to find not only were the cars still there, but there were more of them. And this time, they had set up chairs. I woke up the next morning, groggy, still convinced that last night's argument with Karen had settled everything. But the second I pulled back my curtains, my stomach twisted into a tight knot. Not only were the cars still parked there were more of them. And this time, they had set up chairs. I blinked, thinking maybe my sleep-deprived brain was hallucinating. But no, right there, in the middle of Mimi property, a full-on neighborhood gathering was underway. A couple of soccer moms in oversized sunglasses sipped iced coffee under a pop-up canopy. A few kids ran circles around a folding table, where a man, probably one of Karen's friends, was slicing into a watermelon like this was some kind of community picnic. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. This was a declaration of war. I yanked on some jeans, threw on a shirt, and stormed outside, the heat of my frustration nearly matching the sun beating down overhead. Karen spotted me almost immediately, and, as if on cue, plastered on that infuriatingly smug smile. "Oh, good morning, neighbor," she chirped, waving a little too enthusiastically. "Beautiful day for some fresh air, isn't it?" I didn't respond. My eyes darted around, taking in the sheer audacity of what was happening. Someone had set up a Bluetooth speaker, blaring a pop playlist like this was some sort of festival. There were lawn chairs lined up like stadium seating on my property. On my land. I forced myself to take a slow, deep breath before speaking. "Karen," I said, voice tight. "What the hell is going on here?" She gasped, clutching her chest like I had just insulted her entire bloodline. "Oh my gosh, there's no need to use that tone," she scolded, shaking her head like I was some unruly child. "We're just enjoying the lovely space. You wouldn't want to be the kind of neighbor who hates community bonding, would you?" I was so stunned by the sheer narcissistic insanity of her response that I actually laughed. "Community bonding? Karen, this is my private property. You can't just—" "Oh, lighten up." She cut me off, waving me away as if I were some sort of minor inconvenience. "Nobody's hurting anything. The last owner never made a fuss about this." I gritted my teeth. "For the last time, I am not the last owner. And I never gave you permission to treat my land like a public park." Karen rolled her eyes and took a dramatic sip from her oversized iced coffee. "You're so territorial," she huffed. "I mean, honestly, what are you even using this space for? Just letting it sit here? That's so selfish." I felt my blood pressure spike to dangerous levels. "Selfish?" the first repeated, my voice coming out in a stunned half laugh. "You mean like the people who just took over my property without asking? Like the people who are throwing a full-blown tailgate party on land that they don't own?" "Oh, don't be ridiculous," Karen scoffed, shaking her head as if I was the irrational one. "It's just a little gathering. You're acting like we built a skyscraper here." I was about 2 seconds away from losing it. "Karen, I am done with this conversation. I'm giving you 5 minutes to clear everyone off my property before I start calling tow trucks and the police." The second the words left my mouth, the entire picnic ground to a halt. The moms in lawn chairs exchanged nervous glances. Even the guy with the watermelon hesitated, knife hovering mid-slice. Clearly, none of them had anticipated actual consequences. Karen, however, doubled down. "Oh, please," she scoffed, dramatically tossing her platinum blonde hair. "You wouldn't dare. You'll look insane, calling the police over some parked cars and a few lawn chairs." My jaw clenched so hard I thought I might crack a molar. "Try me." Something in my tone must have finally registered, because her smirk twitched just a little. But instead of backing down, she took a step closer, lowering her voice to an infuriatingly condescending whisper. "Listen," she murmured, tilting her head. "You really don't want to be that neighbor, do you? The one who causes drama over nothing? You just moved here. Do you really want to make enemies so soon?" I almost laughed in her face. "Karen," I said evenly, "you're threatening me while trespassing on my land. That's bold." Her expression faltered just for a second before she quickly recovered. "Fine," she sniffed. "I'll ask people to leave. But don't expect anyone to be happy about it." She turned to her friends. The one still sitting on me land clapped her hands together and called out, "All right, folks. Apparently, our new neighbor doesn't believe in community spaces. Guess we'll have to find somewhere else to be welcomed." I nearly saw red. One by one, the guests started packing up, throwing me the occasional side eye as if I were the one ruining their fun. The cars started pulling out of my driveway, but not before Karen made one final theatrical show of sighing dramatically and shaking her head. "I really hope you don't regret this," she said. "This neighborhood is built on relationships, you know." I held her gaze, deadpan. "Funny. I thought it was built on property rights." Her face twisted for half a second before she forced another tight smile. "Enjoy your empty lot then," she snapped before turning on her heel and stalking back to her house. I watched her go, knowing this wasn't over. And I was right. Because that night, she retaliated. And this time, it was personal. I barely slept that night. I knew Karen wasn't the type to take a loss gracefully. The way she had stormed off, throwing those passive-aggressive jabs, told me everything I needed to know. She was going to escalate. And I was right. The next morning, I stepped outside with my coffee, already bracing for whatever fresh hell awaited me. And there it was, a sign. A massive, neon pink sign plastered onto my fence that read, "No parking, no problem. Welcome to Karen's community space." I choked on my coffee. She had actually doubled down. The lawn chairs were back. The sea coolers were back. And worst of all, The cars were back. At least 7 of them lined up neatly along my property like some kind of entitled parade, reclaiming the very land I had kicked them off the day before. And Karen? She was standing in the middle of it all, sunglasses perched on her smug little face, chatting with Mark and their group of self-important suburbanites, as if she had just won something. I clenched my jaw so tight I thought I might crack a tooth. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. This was an outright declaration of war. Fine. She wanted to play dirty. I could play dirtier. I didn't storm over this time. I didn't give her the satisfaction of an immediate reaction. No, I went back inside, grabbed my phone, and started making calls. Step 1. Call the tow trucks. I dialed the best tow company in town. I didn't want just one truck, I wanted 4. I wanted a fleet. Step 2. Call the city. Karen had just unknowingly gifted me the perfect excuse to unleash absolute bureaucratic hell on her. I called the city zoning department and reported an unauthorized event on private property, which, fun fact, comes with steep fines and legal repercussions. Step 3. Call the HOA. Now, normally, I hate HOAs. They're a nightmare. But in this case, they were my secret weapon. My neighborhood had strict property rules, and using someone else's land as a community gathering space was a massive violation. Now, all I had to do was wait. And oh, did it pay off? The reckoning begins 15 minutes later. The first tow truck rolled in, then another, then another. One by one, the drivers hopped out, assessed the situation, and got to work. The reaction from Karen's group was instant and priceless. "Heywhat are you doing?" One woman shrieked as her minivan was hooked up and lifted off the ground. Karen bolted across my lawn like a rabid raccoon. "You can't do this," she screamed, shoving her sunglasses to the top of her head. "This is illegal. You have no right." I took a slow sip of my coffee, watching the chaos unfold. "Actually, I do." I pulled out my phone and played the recording of her from yesterday, where she oh so proudly announced, "We've been using this space for years. He's just being difficult." Karen's face turned the color of expired cottage cheese. "You admitted to trespassing, Karen," I said calmly. "You're literally on tape proving my case. So yeah, I have every right." She spun around, looking for backup, but her friends were too busy scrambling to stop their cars from being towed. The tow truck drivers weren't messing around, they had orders, and a legal claim to remove every single unauthorized vehicle. Then, just when I thought it couldn't get better, the city officials arrived. The final blow, a white city truck pulled up, and out stepped a man in an official-looking uniform, clipboard in hand. I had spoken to him earlier, explaining that my wonderful neighbor had been operating an unauthorized event on my land. Turns out, the city takes that very seriously. Karen saw him and immediately launched into Karen mode. "Oh, thank goodness you're here," she exclaimed, flipping the switch from screeching harpy to concerned citizen in half a second. "This man is out of control. He's calling tow trucks on innocent people and harassing our neighborhood gatherings." The official held up a hand, cutting her off. "Ma'am, are you the one who set up the event?" Karen hesitated, glancing at me. Well, I mean, it's not really an event, per se, just a little get-together." The official didn't even blink. "Do you have a permit?" Karen paled. "A permit?" "Yes," he continued. "For public use of private property, an organized gathering of this size requires an official permit. Do you have one?" She floundered. But this isn't a big gathering. It's just a casual, MAAM, he interrupted. "You have folding chairs, tables, coolers, a tent, and music playing. That qualifies as an organized event. And since it's on private property without owner consent, you're in violation of multiple city ordinances." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "But we didn't, he's just being difficult." The official didn't care. He started writing her a fine right there on the spot. And then, icing on the cake, the HOA rep arrived. Karen's entire body visibly deflated as the HOA rep pulled out their own clipboard, going over every single violation she'd racked up. Unauthorized signage, noise complaints, unapproved modifications to common property, you name it. By the end of it all, Karen was slapped with hundreds in city fines, HOA violations, and towing fees. The aftermath. By the time the last car was towed and the officials left, Karen was seething. She stood at the edge of my property, her hands balled into fists, glowering at me like I had personally ruined her life. "This isn't over," she hissed. I took another sip of my coffee and grinned. "Oh, I think it is." She stormed off, and I stood there, finally able to enjoy the peaceful silence of my own damn land. Karen thought she could take over my property. Karen thought she could win. Karen thought wrong. Karen disappeared for a few days after her public humiliation. I figured she was licking her wounds, plotting her next entitled tantrum. And sure enough, when she finally emerged, she came back swinging. It was early Saturday morning when I heard the pounding on my door. Not a polite knock. Not a doorbell ring. No, this was the kind of relentless banging that said, "Open up or I'm going to break down this door myself." I sighed, setting down my coffee. I had been expecting this. When I opened the door, there she stood, arms crossed, nostrils flaring, looking like she had spent the last 48 hours working herself into a frothing rage. "You need to fix this," she hissed. I arched an eyebrow. "Fix what? My life?" she shrieked, throwing her hands up. "Because of you, I got fined by the city, my cars got towed, the HOA is threatening legal action, and now I have to attend a mandatory community responsibility seminar. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is?" I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Sounds rough. But I fail to see how any of that is my problem. Karen's face twisted into something primal. "You have ruined my reputation in this neighborhood. Everyone is treating me like some kind of criminal. I mean," I gestured vaguely towards my property. "You did illegally use my land for your personal parking lot. So, not sure what you expected." Her nostrils flared. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It was a community space. I was just trying to make the neighborhood a better place. But no, you had to go and be a selfish, bitter little man about it." She stepped closer, jabbing a perfectly manicured finger into my chest. "Well, congratulations, you won. Are you happy?" I tilted my head, pretending to think about it. "Honestly? Yeah, I'm thrilled." Karen let out a strangled noise that was somewhere between a scream and a sob. "Well, guess what?" she spat. "I talked to my lawyer, and what you did was harassment. I could sue you for emotional distress." I smirked. "You mean when I called tow trucks on trespassing vehicles? Or when I reported an illegal event on my land? Because last time I checked, enforcing my legal property rights wasn't harassment." She faltered, lips pressing into a thin line. "You'll regret this. Just wait." I folded my arms. "Karen, I'm going to say this once, so listen carefully. You lost. It's over. You can either move on with your life, or you can keep making things worse for yourself. But either way, I'm done entertaining your nonsense. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have better things to do than listen to you whine about consequences." I stepped back and slammed the door in her face. That should have been the end of it. But Karen, being Karen, had one last pathetic move left to play. The final act of desperation that night, around 2 a.m., I was woken up by the sound of tires screeching. Then came a thunderous crash. I bolted upright, heart hammering in my chest. For a split second, I thought maybe someone was breaking in. But when I rushed to the window and looked outside, I saw something far, far dumber. Karen had driven her SUV straight into my fence. The front end of her luxury vehicle was buried halfway through the wooden posts, airbags deployed, steam hissing from the engine. And Karen? She was stumbling out of the driver's seat, disoriented, phone clutched in one hand. She was drunk. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. "Yeah, I need to report an accident. A driver just plowed through my fence. Oh, and she's absolutely wasted." By the time the cops arrived, Karen was crying hysterically. She tried to blame it on faulty brakes, but the police weren't buying it. Especially not when she blew well over the legal limit on a breathalyzer test. Watching her get cuffed and shoved into the back of a squad car was possibly the most satisfying thing I've ever witnessed. The aftermath: Karen was charged with DUI, property damage, and reckless endangerment. Her car was totaled. The HOA officially banned her from hosting any gatherings for the next 5 years. And to top it all off, her husband, who had apparently had enough of her antics, filed for divorce 2 months later. By the end of the year, Karen was gone. She put her house up for sale and moved out of the neighborhood, leaving behind nothing but a trail of bad decisions and an expensive mess to clean up. I, on the other hand, finally got my property back. No more unauthorized parking. No more ridiculous entitlement. Just peace, quiet, and the satisfaction of knowing that I had out Karen. Final lesson. Some people think they can take whatever they want. That rules don't apply to them. That they can bully and manipulate their way through life without consequences. But the truth is, consequences always come. And Karen, she learned that the hard way. Looking back, I realize Karen never thought she'd lose. People like her never do. They move through life with an unshakable sense of entitlement, believing the world owes them something just because they demand it loudly enough. She thought she could walk all over me. She thought my silence meant weakness. That if she ignored my boundaries long enough, they'd just disappear. But she was wrong. Actions have consequences. No matter how much entitlement someone carries, no matter how many manipulative tricks they try to pull, reality always comes knocking. And Karen? She got a front row seat to what happens when you push people too far. I won't lie, watching her downfall was satisfying. Seeing her face when the tow trucks arrived. Hearing the desperate edge in her voice when she realized she couldn't weasel her way out of legal trouble. Watching her drunken disaster unfold in real time, it was poetic. Like watching karma unfold in 4K Ultra HD. But the real victory? It wasn't just getting my property back. It was proving that people like Karen don't get to win forever. So if you ever find yourself dealing with someone who thinks they can trample all over you, stand your ground. Fight back. Because at the end of the day, a Karen is just a bully in designer sunglasses. And bullies only win if you let them. Me? I didn't let her. And I never will.